Tēnā koutou katoa, ka hui mai nei I tēnei wā. I mi ana ki, nā mana whenua. Ko Vanessa toku ingoa. I whanau mai aiho ki raro I a Table Mountain, South Africa. I no o ki Melbourne, Australia, mō ngā tō, rau te ko marima. Hioi, ko Aotearoa toku kainga I nāia nei. Kei toronga o e noho ana. I mai ana o he Chief Executive ki Volunteering Bay of Plenty. Nō reira, tēnā koto, tēnā koto, tēnā koto katoa. And I just said, greetings to everyone gathered here today. Greetings to the people who have genealogical ties to this land. My name is Vanessa. I was born under Table Mountain, South Africa. I have been in Melbourne, Australia for 25 years, and New Zealand is where my home is now. Taronga is where I live. My work is Chief Executive of Volunteering Bay of Plenty. Formal greetings to you all. Thank you for being here. We're going to kick off smart because today's session is session 3 of 3, and so that's getting closer to the cocktail event, which is what we're all hanging out for. You ready for a drink, people? So we need to do that. And this session is entitled Embracing the Future of Volunteering, and I'll just be facilitating, introducing our speakers and facilitating a panel discussion, which we would like our participants to participate in as well. So looking forward to that. We are celebrating National Volunteer Week in New Zealand, and it ought to be celebrated because we contribute more than $4 billion to the economy every year in New Zealand. That ought to be celebrated. And today's topic is really, really apt, I think. So we want to embrace the future of volunteering because we need volunteering to continue. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce 4 people to you. One is going to join us via live link. Not really, it's a pre-recording, but we can work with that. So I think I just missed my own slide, that was me. And that's what we're talking about. So Tania Jones is the chairperson of Volunteering New Zealand. Tania is the managing director of a coaching and training firm with a focus on early entrepreneurship and governance. She's a committed volunteer for education, youth, enterprise and community development issues. She has 20 years experience in not-for-profit governance across a variety of organisations covering national, regional and local interests. Tania has been involved with New Zealand's regional volunteer centres at a governance level, having previously been the chair of Volunteer Marlborough and the chair of the Volunteer Centre Network Aotearoa Leadership Group. She is passionate and committed in supporting volunteering within New Zealand and internationally as a member of IRV. She is an experienced, highly motivated, committed and results-focused leader. So we're going to try and hook you up with a video and we welcome Tania Jones. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone, ko Tania Jones tuku ingoa, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā tāwaka. I'm in the Wellington region, so I'm going to welcome you to be here with me virtually because I can't be there with you in person. Nō mai haere mai, ki whananui atara, I raro I te korowai manaki o te Aotearoa me Ngāti Tōranatia. Nō reira, karama mai, mehi mai, whakatau mai, tīnā tātou katoa. Kia ora everyone. I have the absolute privilege of being the chair of Volunteering New Zealand, which is particularly special this week as we celebrate National Volunteer Week 2021. Te wiki te au amotu. Very warm welcome to all of you at the Hui today. Thank you to Volunteering Bay of Plenty for the invitation to participate in Vofest. Very much appreciated. I love championing volunteering all across the motu, so thank you for inviting us to participate. Coming together to connect and celebrate volunteers, mahi aroha and volunteering is always a pleasure and I hope you have a great day. The volunteering sector is diverse and dynamic, and as you look around the room today, I'm sure that you agree with those 2 words at least. Where every person makes an impact and is impacted. So in Te Wiki Te Au Amotu, I want to first recognise and acknowledge all volunteers around Aotearoa. No matter how creating another shift entirely. Change presents different challenges across the sector, but also highlights unique opportunities for reshaping and improving the practice of volunteering. The sector will need to work together to reimagine volunteering and contribute to its new framing and shape. Volunteer trends were changing prior to the global pandemic and have shifted dramatically since, especially in access to funding, changing demographics of volunteer recruits and regional differences, and also the burnout of volunteer managers is something for us to watch as well. The ability to respond has been honed, but we need to now embed the learnings of lockdown and embrace the changes ahead, rather than try to hold on to things that now won't work in this new environment. The future of volunteering will need to be underpinned by a sector-led national volunteering strategy embraced by all central government parties, which influences policy development and service delivery decisions in all portfolios. A bold voice from our sector, with government, both central and local, that acknowledges that we work across boundaries supporting our communities. We are very fortunate to have a Minister in the Right Honourable Priyanka Radhakrishnan, Minister for the Community and Voluntary Sector, who has spent her work life advocating for people whose voices are often unheard, and often volunteers appear invisible in reporting or policy decisions. She has worked with our diverse communities across Aotearoa and is committed to ensuring that their voices are heard in Parliament and that they're supported to thrive. Volunteering New Zealand is excited to reimagine volunteering in partnership with her and with you as the sector. The future of volunteering in New Zealand needs to be one where the contribution of volunteers is no longer invisible, no longer discussed as a nice to have, but actually where volunteering is recognised as delivering vital services, as well as protecting the well-being of our society. More than 1 million people across Aotearoa say they volunteer for an organisation, but much more happens within communities, between people, and increasingly in different ways. Aotearoa has been recognised in international reports as traditionally having a high volunteer rate compared with the rest of the world. Around half of our team of 5 million actively support organisations and other people through volunteering, social action, and mahi arama. When you count the voluntary contribution gifted to or through organisations, we give 159 million hours per year to enable our not-for-profit sector to operate. Volunteer work in this context contributes $4 billion to our economy. The value of the contribution of volunteers around Aotearoa needs to be acknowledged. This goes much wider and deeper than any economic calculations. The contribution to our collective well-being is immeasurable, as is the impact on individuals as they volunteer. Volunteering New Zealand recognises that volunteering has many names and many guises, and that is because it means something different to each of us, depending on our backgrounds, whānau, age, gender, where we're from, perhaps even where we're going to, and possibly even depending on what activity it is that we're doing at the time. However, no matter the name it goes by, embracing the future of volunteering needs us to continue to be united as a nation of people who give. We are united by our shared histories of aroha, manaakitanga, small acts of kindness and connection through and within our communities. People are at the heart of this, people connecting to others. People are at the heart of all volunteering and mahi aroha, whatever form it takes. People connecting to and for their communities. People gifting their mahi with aroha and kindness to those around them. People recognising a need, an opportunity within their communities. People recognising a moment to make a difference, to carve out a different future for themselves, for others, our motu and our whenua. Through volunteering, people are reimagining their own futures and acting on this. He whakatauki I ki ana, he aha te mea nui o tēnei au, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. I hope you're having a great time at Vofest and that you enjoy celebrating and being together, acknowledging volunteering in all its forms. Te Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thank you, Tania. That was really good. There's some good points which I'm sure the panel's going to pick up on, and we'll have a bit of a chat around that. And my next guest who's going to come out and speak to you is Berenice. Berenice Langson has an extensive background in working with volunteers at various not-for-profits and NGOs over the past 25 years. Berenice migrated from South Africa to New Zealand in November 2001. She has worked in a variety of roles, from public relations and advocacy coordinator at the Cancer Council, managing Safe to Go, New Zealand's child restraints program, and reported directly to its funders ACC, LTNZ and the board. In 2014, she started as volunteer coordinator at IHC New Zealand, later as national team leader, and was based in the North Shore in Auckland. In addition, she volunteered at Hospice West Auckland and Hearts Kids New Zealand, managing their volunteer programs. In 2018, Berenice received the Outstanding Leader in Volunteer Engagement from Volunteering Auckland. In April 2019, she transferred to IHC in Tauranga, and earlier this year, she joined the Board of Trustees of Volunteering Bay of Plenty. Berenice's passion lies in making a positive difference in the community she serves. Please welcome Berenice.
Thank you. Someone once said, you sound good on paper. Yeah, you do sound good. I hope I can deliver. Well, thank you for having me speak here today. As you can see, I'm first and foremost an IHC person working in the community. And what we've done last year through lockdown, I'd like to take you through that, because I think that just shifted volunteering for us in IHC and how we're going to do this in the future.
Front arrow.
Yeah, so we've learned some trends, and I'm going to take you through that. I manage the IHC Friendship Programme, and we match volunteers with people we support. It is about a one-to-one friendship, and we encourage volunteers to stay on the program at least for 1 year, and they do fun activities. So this is about meeting up face-to-face and getting out and about in the community. As you can imagine, when lockdown happened, that no longer could happen. So we had to rethink how we do volunteering. The people we support was in their houses, and they still needed that outside connection. So what we called up our, that's mine. So what we had to do is we done stuff like gate visits, so volunteers could go to the gates of the person they're in a friendship with and have that conversation 2 meters away. They done letterbox drops, they done FaceTiming, and the phone became a tool that we used every day through lockdown. Sometimes it was 2 or 3 phone calls a day to the people we support. Imagine being stuck in a house and you can't get out and you can't understand why you can't get out. Our volunteers had to play a much bigger role, and they were in lockdown as well. So it was something nurturing both ways, where they could also make that connections. Our family farmer team is another leg of our volunteering team, and our family farmer liaisons connect families to our services or to any service. So somebody can phone in there, and if they need to get a diagnosis or a school, we have a team of 4 people across New Zealand that manages that for IHC. I'm just trying to paint you a picture of how we operate before I take you forward. So the 2 teams came together. So what happened is we were given a day to pack up and go and work from home. And we are people's people, and we contact with people all the time. And so telling me to go home and work from home was a challenge. It was like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to do? We had to immediately start phoning our volunteers, start phoning the people in our services and letting them know what's happening here. So we had a team of 12, the IHC volunteer coordinators and the family final liaison team. We were tasked with phoning all our members. IHC members is about 2,100 members. And then we started working together with Carers New Zealand, and they have 50,000 members. And we were asked to call all these people, 12 of us were asked to call all these people and ask them how we can help. Because remember, it was one day in lockdown, 4 weeks. How are you going to deal with this? There were some people with Carers New Zealand that needed food parcels, that needed medication delivered to them, and they just didn't know how they were going to do this. And so the 12 of us had to sit. Firstly, my boss got all these lists together and sent it off to me, and I had to divvy it up between the 12 of us. And we were sitting there daily, phoning people, finding out how you're doing, can we help in any way. We didn't get through the 50,000, but we tried. So then we were listening to people's concerns. There were people that was genuinely just lonely. They had their stocks. They had everything they needed, but they just didn't have any people contact. I'm one of them. I live on my own. I've got a lovely lady that lives upstairs from me, so we connected. But it was quite difficult when you're sitting there and you're thinking, oh, and especially when you're that type of person, that personality that needs to get out. You need that phone call. But luckily I had a few phone calls to make, so I was kept busy. But then there's people out there that just were lonely. There were people that needed food parcels, there were people that needed medications, there were people that just needed somebody to listen to. They going through a struggle. One person that called in, she had a son with an intellectual disability, and she just needed somebody to spend other time with because she was with her son all the time. So those are the kind of phone calls we were dealing with, and it was definitely a learning experience for us because never did we have to deal with this, never did we have to hear how many things were going on out there that people were just not staying connected. So with Carers New Zealand and IHC, we developed a website called wecare.kiwi. And so people with any situation could come in there, whether you were retired and couldn't get around, whether it was school children needing some activities. They could come there and we would then man those phone calls and try and connect them. One of the ladies that I was put in touch with, she was Egyptian, and she couldn't speak English properly. And they tried to match her with somebody, and eventually she came on to me. And she said, "Oh, I understand you clearly." I don't know if it's because we're from Africa, but we could understand each other. She said, "Oh, thank goodness they put me in touch with you." And so from that, I've learned that her husband had diabetes. They were both over 65, so they couldn't get out. They needed food parcels delivered. I organized all of that for them, and we got their food parcels organized. And she still calls me. She's still got my number, and she says, Berenice, you have to come and visit me. I feed you. No, I don't need to be fed. Because that's what she can do, is cook and feed. Those are the connections we made, and then lockdown stopped. And we were sitting here with all these people, and IHC went out and thought, well, how did this change our thinking? And so with our 4 family liaison team, we developed AFI Connect. So AFI Connect is a website where anybody can go and anybody that needs any kind of support can go in there and find a liaison near them, and they will connect them to a service that they require. So we've only got 4 nationally. We need to build that team. And then the other thing that we've developed through that is because a lot of the volunteers needed to connect with their friends and they couldn't face to face. So we developed the iVolunteering program. That's a national program now, where you can come in and it's actually just partnering with somebody anywhere in New Zealand, and it's a virtual friendship. So you phone, you FaceTime, you can write letters, you can send cards to each other, and it's just a new way of volunteering and setting up these friendships and making sure that people are staying connected, especially the people that we support. Thank you.
Thank you, Berenice. That's some awesome work that you guys do. That's really, really great. Thank you. We'll be very keen to chat a little bit more about that in a minute, which is just awesome. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the next guest. And our guest here is Michelle Elborn. Michelle is with Bay Conservation Alliance. She's the CE there. And Michelle has a long-standing passion for the environment. That's lucky because that's where she works. Originally from the UK and having completed a master's degree in conservation and recreation management, she immigrated to Aotearoa in 2001 and was delighted to initially work for the Department of Conservation. Moving on to Tauranga City Council, she spent the next decade working across sustainability, community development, strategy and communications. She's now very excited to be leading Bay Conservation Alliance, which presents a huge opportunity to develop a new model for citizen-led conservation. Outside of work, Michelle loves time with family and friends, surfing, travelling, and anything adventurous. Welcome, Michelle.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Michelle Elborn toku ingoa. Thank you very much for the invitation to come along and speak today, Vanessa. And I really want to start by saying a really big thank you. And that thank you goes out to all the volunteers for our region and nationally, because I think New Zealand, I think, can be very proud of itself in terms of the amount of volunteer commitment we have across multiple sectors. And so you've got a number of sectors sitting represented on the stage here today, but volunteers are just play a huge, huge role in enabling some really amazing outcomes here in New Zealand. As my introduction advised, I manage an organisation called Bay Conservation Alliance. We're an incorporated society that supports community-led conservation groups across the Bay of Plenty. This is our vision, and we've actually just revised our strategy recently. So we're about collaboration essentially, and that's one of the biggest sort of things that we're sort of looking to help support. And the end goal that we're really seeking is to support Indigenous biodiversity in our region, in the Bay of Plenty. And as you may well know, we've got some really, really special species here in New Zealand that live only in New Zealand. So for us, this is a really important piece of work. And our role within that is essentially to support and sustain those community groups, those volunteers that are doing the real money and the real work on the ground. So I think as we sort of operate, we have a realisation that we're stronger when we work together, and this really is the same in the volunteer sector. And Bay Conservation is about bringing our groups together and sharing our learnings and our knowledge and our resources so that we can achieve better outcomes. And so from a volunteer perspective, that means that there's a whole bunch of things that each group has to do. One of them being, let's keep our volunteers safe. So for example, in the instance we've got Hun sitting in the audience here from Tania Jones Kiwi Trust, They have a large amount of volunteers that go out into the bush managing traps. So we need to make sure that those volunteers know how to use their equipment safely, how to keep themselves safe, how to ensure somebody knows that they're going out into the bush that day and that there's a reporting back. And so, and those groups are required to have health and safety plans in place. And that can be quite an arduous task for volunteers to put comprehensive safety plans and those kind of things into place. So an organisation like us now can put tools and templates into place to share out to all of our groups. So that lightens the load on the shoulders of the volunteer. And so we haven't got 19 groups all thinking, how do I write a policy or a plan around health and safety? We've got somebody giving us some templates that's going to trigger some really important questions and planning for us. So stronger together. I think the future of volunteering is thinking, how can we work together more and how can we leverage off of one another's experiences and learnings. Here's just some of my kind of thoughts around the future of volunteering. So we hear a lot about changing demographics, and certainly from our conservation groups we hear lots about ageing volunteers and we're not getting younger people through, and what's going to happen when Julian has been working hard for 20 years and he's moving on. So changing demographics, and I've heard it as I've walked around the exhibition space today from other entities that this is a common thing. And so how can we think about engaging other parts of the community, and I'll give a few examples of that. Changing expectations. So volunteers have different expectations of what they're expecting to experience now when they come and they gift some time. Some come and do that completely with no expectation of anything in return, and others are wanting something out of it. They're either wanting to develop skills, to go on a new career pathway, or they're particularly passionate about something because of an influence that's occurred in their lives. So I think understanding expectations is really helpful for us to think about when we're looking at engaging volunteers. Providing learning experiences. So I think in terms of holding on to volunteers, it's fantastic when we're continuing to learn and grow as a volunteer. And so what new little things can we be adding in over time that keeps our volunteers engaged and they feel like they're also walking away with something as well as contributing. Aligning values is something to think about as well. So often, we obviously see people that have values around the environment and feel really passionate about that. And so it feels good for them to get out into the forest and do something that is contributing to something that is values based for them. So thinking about also how can we kind of sell our story that attracts and people can kind of connect to that from a values perspective. Selling big picture aspirations. So it's been really interesting, I think, in the conservation space, because a few years ago New Zealand made this big announcement that it wanted to be predator free by 2050. All of a sudden this really huge big picture aspiration has been thrown out, which is going to add huge value to environmental outcomes. And it's because it's this big picture sort of aspiration, people are like, well, is it achievable? And I don't know actually the answer to that, but it's something that people think that they can contribute to, and I can get involved in it. It actually sounds exciting. And from a volunteering point of view, it's been really interesting to see the take up of people now trapping in their own backyard. So there's no easier place to become a volunteer than actually in your own property, but there's never really felt like many opportunities to do that. But suddenly people are being encouraged to have a rat trap box in their backyard as part of Predator Free Bay of Plenty. If you're not a part of it yet, check out the website and get involved. But what that's doing is it's easy to do that in your own backyard, and then people thinking, oh wow, I've had 5 rats in the last 2 months. They really are out there. I didn't think they were in an urban context, and wow, how many are there everywhere else? And actually I'm near a council reserve, or Taniwanuku is only 3 kilometres up the road from me. I might give them a call and I might get involved in bigger picture volunteering opportunities, so that home-based thing stimulates something different and that big picture aspiration. Corporate social responsibility is something we've been thinking quite a bit about as well, because more corporates are thinking about how can we contribute in some way, what are our values as an organisation, or what's our level of corporate social responsibility, or things that we want to give back to the community. And so if you can try and find some alignments with some corporates within your region, then that can be an opportunity to unlock some volunteer input, and I'll share an example. So we spend a lot of our time sort of supporting existing groups, and as I said, 19 different groups all out doing fantastic things, from pest control to planting trees to monitoring species to looking after waterways. So it's just how can we kind of support those groups, help them to retain their energy, stay enthusiastic as much as possible, and wrap support around them by, I think, often trying to lighten the load on some of the harder parts, especially running a community organisation from a volunteer perspective. And the example of community groups, they get involved as a volunteer because they want to go out to the field and do the cool stuff. But actually, there's all these other tasks to do, like the back-end administration of fundraising and marketing and selling your story and all of those things. So wherever you can support in those areas is really important too. So we often hear, how can we engage more young people into our volunteer conservation groups? And I think sometimes we have to think a little bit differently about how we engage young people. And you know, youth may not feel that comfortable in turning up to a standard volunteer day that starts with flasks of tea and a kind of chat, and then some time in the bush. Or they may be, but young people, I think, will probably feel like they need some of the skills and knowledge to feel that they can come along and contribute. So we're doing quite a lot of work around working with schools. We have a nature education programme in schools now, and it is very much a skills development focus, so that those kids can come in and they learn how to do certain things, including setting traps in the bush, understanding the ethics of what's happening in that space, and they can make their decisions around whether that's something for them or not. And then they have some skills to think, well, actually, I could come out to a conservation group now, or I could set up something ourselves. And so a really lovely example, the photo on the right is Tauranga Boys College. They asked us to facilitate all year 9 students this year, so that's 430 students we've had this term coming into Ongetiti Forest in the Kaimai Mamakus. But Automotai College have a camp area in Whakamaramara, which they only were visiting really kind of a couple of weeks of the year, and then this amazing resource was sitting doing nothing. So we've talked to them now about, well, we could help you get some funding to put some new traps into this area, but you guys as volunteers essentially going to need to help manage it. So now Automotai College have committed to managing a new 4-hectare block of land for pest control, and the teachers on board, and they're going to be going up there once a month to manage those trap lines. So that's a really fantastic example of those kids being empowered to achieve something for themselves. Engaging corporates. So corporates sometimes just want a one-off thing, one day a year. For example, a corporate is given time to get out of the office and go and contribute something to the community. And we've had some of these opportunities come through volunteer VOP, where our corporates contacted these guys and said, actually, we want to do something environmental, and then that would have led to a call to me, and we've been able to make some connections. Awesome corporates have come directly to us. So the photo on the left-hand side was Vofest School. They came along about 2 or 3 years ago and had so much fun that they've actually come back each year now, one day a year. The photo on the right-hand side is of the site that I just talked about that Automotai College are at large going to be managing now, called Otiora. And so Balance came on board as a corporate sponsor for Bay Conservation last year, but they said we don't just want to so their funding is supporting the school education programme, but we don't just want to put money in and that's kind of it, so let's build an actual kind of working relationship. And their CEO said to us, I'm really passionate about Predator Free 2050. I want all of my staff to understand what that means. So can you help us with that? And we're like, absolutely, we can definitely help you with that. So we're now running 4 corporate days a year for balanced staff, taking them to Otiora, so we'll maybe have 30 staff on each day. And so the morning is spent educating them around Predator Free, the pests that are in the landscape and why they're a problem, the species that we're trying to protect, and then Balance have actually set up the new traps into the site, and they will come 4 times a year now to also check those trap lines. So between school and Balance, they will now be able to manage that area. So it's a great way of just engaging other inputs. Volunteer learning and recognition. I think this is a really important area to ensure that, as I said before, supporting the learning of volunteers across your network. And so for Bay Conservation, we try and run about 5 different kind of networking or learning workshop type events for our network each year. We have one event at the end of the year, which is our kind of bigger event, where we recognise and thank all of the volunteers, and we put on a number of different speakers that will be kind of interesting and stimulating, hopefully, to those volunteers. And then just being aware of then some of the other kind of award opportunities, so the Tech Community Awards, for example. Each year that comes through, then we try and think who in our network do we think really deserves recognising this year, and make sure that those applications are put in, so that volunteers are feeling that they're being credited for the efforts that they make. And some love that, and some just like to fly under the radar. So I think have fun. So from the groups that I see that just have remembering that one of the great benefits of volunteering is actually the social outcomes that comes from it. So whenever we do surveys, you think, oh yeah, I'm there because I want to be an environmental warrior. But actually one of the things that you walk away with is some really lovely social outcomes, because you build new connections and new friendships, as you talked about. And that just adds value to your own life. And I think if you can make the experience fun, or those volunteers make it fun for themselves. And so one of our groups down in Whakatane, every year that group of volunteers goes on a camping weekend together. And it's just something that keeps them really connected. And I think if you can kind of encourage and support that kind of stuff and keep it fun, it keeps people engaged. And I think, I'm going to finish where I started, which is a really big thank you to volunteers and what they commit to. Thank you.
Really awesome to hear about your work, and particularly would like to really pick up on the CSR, the young people, the recognition, and the fun elements. And that's what today is about. It's National Volunteer Week, guys. We ought to be celebrating. I can't wait for drinks, so don't run away. All right. Last but very much not least, lucky last in fact, is somebody called Davina Plummer. And Davina is with she's the manager of community ministries at the Salvation Army. And Davina and husband Jacob have 3 daughters. I love that people put this in their profiles, because it just talks about Vanessa, and what we're about and everything. It's just lovely. Davina worked in government departments for a decade before being a stay-at-home mum, leading a weekly mainly music group. I remember dragging my kids to that. And being an advocate for parents of children with cleft lip palates. Davina is now privileged to manage a team providing a broad range of social services in the Salvation Army's community ministries in Tauranga. Davina has lived in the North Island of New Zealand as well as in Melbourne and Singapore. She has a passion to see families and individuals thrive and live life to the full. Welcome, Davina.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko tangi te keo te maunga, ko te whanganui a tara te moana, no te upoko o te ika ahau, ko te ope whakaora toku marae, kei tauranga moana ahau e noho ana, ko Wilfred toku papa, ko Margaret toku whaia, ko Jacob toku tane, ko Jasmine rawa, ko Miriam, Isabel toku tamahine, ko Davina toku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. So, Te Ope Whakaora is my marae. Te Ope Whakaora is the Salvation Army, the army that brings life. That's what we're about. We want to see people living life to the full. We want to see people absolutely thriving, not just struggling to get by. So our mission is to care for people, to transform lives and to reform society. And so for us, connection is where it starts with volunteering. Connection. We have so many people say to us that they give back because of gratitude, whether it was with the Salvation Army or whether someone else in the community helped them through a rough time. So they give out of paying forward what someone else gave to them. So that's a real key important factor for us in volunteering, is connecting with people's stories and giving them an opportunity to pay forward or give back for something that they've received. Connection is so important in terms of being able to volunteer, because connecting comes from our connection to something of value to somewhere else. In our family, yes, we're with the Salvation Army, and yes, we give a lot of time there, but we give to community groups, like hockey. My husband's a hockey coach. You heard when I was a stay-at-home mum that I did mainly music. That was volunteering. Our cleft New Zealand connection comes because my youngest daughter had a cleft lip and palate. And we do lots of different things. My eldest daughter does youth search and rescue. So we're a family that volunteers in many different ways in many parts of the community. But I think the key thing has been for each of us, there's a connection. Whether it's my eldest connection to the bush and that's her happy place and looking for people, or my youngest connection with part of her identity and her physical lip condition. So I think connecting where people are at is key. So whatever people's journey is, whatever their identity is, connecting there. And the future of volunteering, I think, is also through connections. Whether we're connecting, as we've heard with Michelle, through schools. We're doing a lot of that these days, connecting with schools. But when those students come in, we want to connect with what their values are, so that we hope those students will come back on their own at a later point and continue volunteering. We connect with different corporates as well, and again, we're trying to connect with what makes a difference to those people so they will come back and give again. COVID was definitely a disruptive time in terms of the ways that we were able to do our volunteering, but we were looking for common connections. So there were English language teachers who would normally be teaching international students who they weren't able to teach. Either the students weren't able to come into the country or they weren't able to connect with them, but they were able to come and assist us with a new group that we were helping of migrants. We had Brazilians and Argentinians who were stuck in New Zealand, couldn't go home, weren't able to access the usual supports, and so became in need. So we were able to make connections with groups that we don't normally interact with. We connected the English language teachers to deliver the food parcels for the migrants and to make the parcels. So I really think the future is connecting. Even if it's connecting one person's 1 hour that they have a year, connecting that with what it is that sets their heart on fire, that they care about, that they want to see in the future. Michelle did talk about those big picture visions, but part of that's connection as well. We need to connect people's time with their passions, whether it's big or small. So we're really focusing on looking at new ways to do connections, whether it's someone whose skill set is an online thing and we've never used that before, there will be a connection. Whether it's a mountain bike group that think, oh, what can I give to the Salvation Army? They could be able to mentor some young men who have never had anyone take them for a bike ride before. So whatever your skill set is, whatever it is that it lights up your world, we've got something that we can connect an opportunity for you for. I like to say to people, not here are our roles and our opportunities, but my question is, what's your superpower? What is your superpower? Because whatever it is, there's something that you can do. There's something that we can connect with the gap that we have. So yes, let's not so much worry about how, we will write the job description for this volunteer space, but what's your passion? What's your superpower? What's our need, and how can we connect? Thank you.
Thank you, Davina. That's just awesome. There are a couple of things there that really resonate with Volunteering Babe Plenty. The whole connect thing is huge for us, so we quite like that. That's amazing. But I think you touched on such a lot of things there for us. The whole family aspect, how we stay connected, being there, doing the little thing that matters. We can move across over there and have a bit of a chat, but we want to invite people who are watching here to also get in, have a go, ask a question, answer something if you would like. So it's not just about us up front here, but we would like to have a bit of a chat. So I'm going to walk across there for a minute. Thank you.
So we talked about a whole lot of things there, and all of you have made individual contributions, but I think today this session was about how do we embrace the changing landscape and what's the future look like. And if you had to say that in one sentence, what would that look like for you? I'll give you a chance just to think about that, because I'd like to ask everybody that. And what is your greatest challenge for that, personally and as an organisation? It would be really good to hear, what's the number one thing on your minds when you're thinking about the future of volunteering? Davina, as you're still on a roll, would you like to go first?
Sure. I guess the space that becomes a challenge for us is things like making sure that we're in a safe space. So we need to get police checks. So many of our volunteer tasks we do need to get a police check for, and that can take some time, and we can be police checking people who've been police checked multiple times by multiple agencies. So I guess that is a difficult thing, especially if we want to be working with vulnerable people, or we're putting people in a position of trust. So our roles, we do work with vulnerable people. Our roles, we do ask people to collect donations on our behalf. So we are putting people in a position of trust. So sometimes it's a process thing, actually, is getting people through quick enough before we lose their interest. Because if the process takes too long, people don't wait. They move on, or they get busy. So I think sometimes it's just those processes that are out of our control, to be honest.
Right, so there's a bit of red tape there, isn't
Yeah,
there?
a bit of red tape.
We need to work through.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Michelle?
Cool. I think I'll lead on from that around sort of identifying the right people for the right volunteer opportunities. Because you don't want to put somebody into a position that maybe isn't the right place for them to be. So I guess matching skill sets, and being realistic about expectations as well, so that it's a positive experience then, and then that hopefully holds that person or keeps them inspired about volunteering in the future.
And you spoke earlier about the education piece, isn't it? That's part of it, is about what's the expectation when you go into the workplace, even as a paid worker. We do that induction really well, but when it comes to volunteer, for example, we don't do that well. So that is something we can really work on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's sort of the induction side of things, and as you say, keeping people safe is a really, it's a big focus now.
Absolutely.
And that can be quite overwhelming for groups to think, how do I structure that and how do I get it right? But there are expectations, from then other agencies like Department of Conservation, for example. If you're working on their land and you're taking volunteers, you need to follow certain policies and processes. So it's making sure you get that stuff right.
Absolutely, that's good. And IHC works with people with who have disabilities, and so how does that impact you specifically?
Firstly, I'd like to go back to police vetting. It's a huge challenge because we do work with the vulnerable community, and it does take some time, and it does become frustrating for a volunteer coming in there that has been police vetted 2 or 3 times that year. It needs to happen again. So can there be an easier process there? Because nowadays we're waiting 6 to 8 weeks for somebody to be
That's
vetted,
massive.
and then they lose interest.
Mm.
Some of them can lose interest, so we need to keep them engaged all the time. But the future of volunteering, I want to talk about that a bit, because people come to IHC wanting to volunteer, and sometimes it's just not the right fit for them for various reasons, language barriers, physical, or it could be anything. It could be geography, demographic, finance, or whatever it can be. So they might not fit into a role that I can offer them. But what we need to start doing is connecting with other organizations, because when I meet somebody and I can't help that person or put them in a role, I'd like to say, you know what, you'd fit perfectly with the Salvation Army, blah 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 blah. You know, so it's about connecting the organizations and making sure we understand what the other one is doing, so that we can point people in the right direction, so that volunteering is not as arduous as it has become.
And that's sort of following on from what Michelle said about the right person with the right role and all of that kind of thing. And we talked earlier off camera about the IT aspect of things and how we need to embrace that. And I think you all caught up to the fact that Volunteering by Plenty has this ecosystem, this digital ecosystem that does exactly that, connects people digitally. We don't want to lose the people side, but we do need to provide some sort of engine behind everything so we can stay connected and get ourselves connected and work with other organisations, other communities. So I think there's a synergy going across that we really need each other, don't we? And we really want to work towards that. So yeah, that was an interesting comment too that Michelle made around corporates and the corporate social responsibility. Did you want to just talk a little bit more about that and how you've worked with that with corporates?
Yeah, I just think it's a real opportunity just to be unlocking kind of new sort of volunteer inputs. And it just depends what the corporate is, you know, what they're sort of defining as where they want to invest their time.
Yeah.
So for us, we were lucky that Predator Free was, for one, an area that they wanted to invest in, and we could help facilitate that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really just having conversations with who's in your local area.
Absolutely.
That you can have a coffee with, and you can understand what their kind of corporate values are and what they're seeking to achieve. And is there any alignment there?
That's right. That's right. And yeah, I like to reflect on the fact that corporates will offer their staff half a day a year, and come Christmas time, Volunteering Bay Plenty is flooded with requests by organisations who want to have a field day or a team outing or a team building exercise, and I just sigh because it's seriously, guys. No, volunteering is actually a way of life. It's giving back to the community all year through. It's about what we do, and we keep quoting the over 4 billion that we contribute to the GDP, but that's only formal volunteering. We haven't even yet touched on the volunteering that happens just down up the street. People, mums don't record, you know, the carpooling, the mainly music running, any of those kinds of things. So I think that's something I'd like to see that we embrace more, is the fact that we need to highlight and actually advocate more for volunteering as just something that we need to be doing and taking care of each other.
And I'll just note on the corporate sort of days, you know, they can take they take time and resource to organise, and a lot of groups actually aren't, you know, I remember getting calls of those last minute things. Have you got anything, you know, could anyone host them next Friday, the 20th? Or actually organising that stuff for small, volunteer-led groups actually is really hard. So it does need to be sort of, you know, planned out. But sometimes the value then of 20 people coming to a place and learning about an issue or whatever it might be is that and we've seen it, a number of those people then say, you know, so what do you do regularly here? How can I contribute? And then some people have come back personally in their own time. And that's really why you do those days, because you're trying to instill an opportunity for longer term volunteering.
And that's great. So we need to keep doing that, absolutely, and get to know people a little bit more. So the Salvation Army then.
We really appreciate the corporate
form of volunteering as well, especially around key seasonal times for us. It makes such a difference. You talked about Christmas. So for us, Christmas is business on top of business. We're absolutely blessed that the community does have Christmas spirit and Christmas cheer and generosity over that season, and it really is quite emotional for us to be in the middle of receiving such generosity and then being able to pass that on and seeing how grateful families in poverty are when they receive that incredible gift. And so the way we do Christmas is we actually turn our centre into a bit of a Christmas shop, empowering parents to actually come through and choose their gifts for their children, because they know that if there's a dinosaur there, Johnny loves dinosaurs, or they will come through and go, oh, llamas, Katie loves llamas. So they know their children, and that is our gift to the parents to enable them to choose, as opposed to going, here's a gift for a boy aged 9. So we do see that having a gift is wonderful, but having the parents empowered to connect with their children again is even more powerful. So we have groups come in, bringing in our donations, sorting them all out, setting up the shop, wrapping the gifts, hosting with Christmas foods, and then helping to put food hampers into the cars. So we really appreciate groups of volunteers at that time of year, and that's something we just could not do with our standard volunteers throughout the year. There are other times, like our annual appeal, where we're both raising awareness as well as raising funds to carry on what we're doing, where we'll have maybe some corporates come through, or people doing micro volunteering, or maybe it's not a corporate, it might be the Girls Brigade, Icons, or it might be the Boy Scouts, or different groups like that. Right. So we really appreciate partnering with corporates and groups for doing big missions, but they're seasonal.
Absolutely. So as leaders, we kind of always have the what if conversations. And so what if volunteering was not seasonal? What if it just became a way of life, and that the spirit of giving happened every day of the year? That would be so awesome, wouldn't it? Just really good. We'll just finish off with a comment from IHC in that regard too.
I think IHC needs to reimagine, one of the keywords this week. It just came from me listening to Davina now. As we need to reimagine and look at how we can involve corporates, because this is a one-to-one friendship, and it is teaching somebody to be a friend to somebody that we support. But we need to have those corporate events, think how we can get do maybe a garden or something, get them in there, and then educate them about the friendship program, and that's how we get. So it's reimagining how we do things.
Absolutely. And while we're at it with our corporates, we start to talk to them about volunteering doesn't have to mean that you have to go and just work in the forest or paint the community centre or clean up the graffiti. It's about all those people that they're paying on the job already, the skills that they bring to their organisations. Not-for-profits would benefit so much from having that skill, because we don't have the resources to hire such skill. So that's something for us to think about. We've kind of run out of time. I would have loved to pick up on the conversation around young people and engaging young people more, but I think the point has been made that we are burning out our older generation, because we keep going to them and asking them to do the volunteer work, and we need to educate the younger people, instill that sense of giving from a young age, so that we can grow new volunteers and we don't have to keep going back to our older demographic who are needing a rest right now, I think. But thank you for your time. Is there a question from the floor before we close? Yes.
Are you doing anything currently to try and involve youth?
I'll ask the panelists. Volunteering Bay of Plenty definitely is working on a schools program at this point in time. I'm often asked to speak at schools, and in my first week I ran through the bubble, as you all know, when the bubble opened I had to run, and in my first week I spoke at 3 different schools in Tauranga alone. So the schools really want to work with us. We have a duty of care. We talked earlier about keeping young people safe. So we're trying to really work through what that might look like and how do we protect them. And the best way for us, from our point of view, is to actually have the school take an active part in it, and the school starts to sign up as we would sign up a member or an organisation. We get the school to sign up. The school puts up the roles, and the schools start to connect their own youth, their own students with those roles. So total control. And we really wanted to protect the young people. So that's what we're doing. But I'd love to hear from this group.
Well, I guess one of the opportunities that we were gifted was Automoto College runs Stars Opoly through the Graham Dingle Foundation. And so we've participated in that last year, and we'll do it again this year. And so we can actually talk to a group of about 4 or 5 students at each time, and then we get another group come through. And part of the challenge in that is they have to ask us what we can do for them and what they can do for us. And that's a great conversation to have, because it's that connect again. Each of those students will have a different passion and skill set, and they'll have different organisations that they connect with. But asking that question, what can we do for each other, is really important, and it starts to have those conversations about, actually, maybe there is something I can do. So I think schools are a great forum for it, but as well as other community groups, and even in our own whānau, let's start at home and look at what we can do, even if it is looking after the neighbour next door or something a bit more formal.
Just for a change, we'll swing this way.
Okay, so we are an adult program, so it's for people that's 17 years and over, and we are trying to get into the high schools to get the year 13s onto the program. So there's definitely work around the country going on around that.
Cool. BCA?
Cool. So I obviously spoke to our school programme. What I would say there is that we're trying to shift our focus away from primary level students more to college level students, because from an environmental education point of view, there's lots in primary and intermediate, and then it falls away at college. But also at college level is the age that you're starting to think, where am I going in life, what career kind of direction, and potentially thinking, what can I give back as well. So that feels like the kind of age band that we want to invest in terms of building kind of skills and confidence in. And then the other thing, not so volunteer, but in terms of capability building, is that we now run a program called Bay Conservation Cadets, which is an employment training and development program, and that's available for age 18 up, and that's a 12-week sort of training program available now here in Tauranga. So when we're seeing quite a lot of young 20-ish people coming on to that.
That's great news. We need to change that landscape for sure, and not drain one demographic all the time. It's been wonderful to have you all on this panel. Thank you so much for sharing of your lives and of your communities and of your organisation. Lovely to see you all. Join us at 4 p.m. We're going to have drinks, and Mark will be speaking about what Volunteering Bay of Plenty brings to the sector. So I'll see you all later.
Cool.
Thank you very much.